In this movie, we're going to look at something pretty familiar, which is to have a chord progression, which has got something about it that you like, but that nevertheless sounds a bit staid or a bit static or not particularly interesting. And we're going to look at ways in which we can move things on a bit. So let's record our chord progression here. You can see in this project, I've got some strings on track 1 and some beats on track 2. And those beats are simply placeholders just to make life a bit more interesting than working to a click track alone. There we go. So I'm not sure we're going to win any awards for this as it stands right now. So let's make life a bit more interesting. So the first thing I'm going to do is to open this part up and actually see what it is that I recorded. So let's have a look at the piano roll display here, and we'll see that what I've got is a D minor chord here, followed by a C major, and then G minor, and then B flat major here at the end. Now, to put all these notes in time, I'm just going to quantize them. And what I might also do is to fix dynamics, so that every note, for now at least, is the same volume. What I'm also going to do is to select all of these notes and make them the same length so that they all last a full bar. So now we've got an absolutely rigid velocity mapping and a length mapping for each of these chords. So what might I do in order to make this a bit more interesting? Well, at the moment, the fact that I've selected strings suggests that I want to have something which is obviously a harmonic foundation for my piece, but there's no reason why I should be limited to harmony alone. So what I'm going to do is to switch off the little MIDI output routing so that I'm not going to hear every note as I select it. And the first thing I might experiment with would be chopping this note here, just to see if I can build some melody into this part as it comes down. So what I'm actually going to do is to sort of produce a little bit of motion so that the note's moving up, so that that note moves up before it falls. And we could do the same thing here. Let's think for a moment. Let's just have that go up to an F. And then here I've got a G minor chord. And what I might do here is to make this a little bit more interesting by going up to a G. And then as we come back to this note, we'll have this note falling down to the D. And I might just put a little bit of variation there as well too. Let's just hear what that sounds like now. Well, that's certainly a lot more interesting than it was before. Now, how did I choose those notes? Well, within the scale of each of these individual chords, the key chord is the first one, D minor. And so I've got the notes of D minor available to me. And even though G, which is this note here, isn't part of a D minor chord, it is part of the scale of D minor. And so therefore, it's really likely that this note wouldn't clash in a way that, for example, if I selected G sharp, it would. So that sounds awful. Let's just get rid of that. And so the reason why the G works better is because, as I say, it's part of that scale. So what we could then do would be to look at some other things that might be interesting to do to these chords to enrich them a bit further. Now, also, the note E is part of the scale of D minor. And what I'm going to experiment with here is just creating a little clash by putting that in as an E on that first chord. Now, I quite like that, but it lasts for too long. So I'm going to bring that back and have that happen instead. So I've still got that note followed by this one. And then what I might do is to see what happens if this one continues before falling. And so on. So what I'm basically doing in this sort of second line down is to have this sort of stepped movement, so that each note here lasts over the bar change before the next one takes over. And that's working really nicely. Now, one thing I'm also tempted to try is that here you can almost hear that there's a chord between this last one and one leading back to D, which would be C major. Now, I could take this whole chord, chop it up and make that a C major, but that might be a little bit obvious. What I'm going to try instead is just moving the bass up to a C. And that's working really nicely as well. That makes that chord really rich and thick and unusual at the end. We could even try taking the note above up to a G as well, making half the chord the beginnings of a C major and leaving these two notes as they currently are. Let's just run that from here. Now that's got me thinking about the bottom end a little bit in terms of how we could potentially build some more movement into this part. Now, as we've got movement going upwards here, it might be nice to try something downwards at the same point so that we're stretching the sort of chord range. We've got these very sort of contained chord progression at the moment. All the notes are quite close together. So anything we can do to sort of push it that way or indeed this way is going to help. So I'm going to just chop this note. Now, I can't come down a step because that's going to not sound great if I preempt this chord by pulling this note down too soon. So instead I'm going to think about other notes that exist in the chord of D minor. We're effectively in D minor for bars 2 and 3 here. So here we've got a D. So the chord of D minor is made up of D, F and A. So I'm going to try an A in the bass there. And here when we move to our C major chord, I'm going to think about something here as well. Now again, the notes of C major are C, E and G, but my next note is a G, so I can't really go down to here and expect that to sound any good. Let's think about something that we might try instead there, like, for example, an E, and we're going to move upwards this time just to balance out this first change. Let's just see what that sounds like. Okay, now this one really isn't working, and if we have a look at this chord and the way that we've got it, we'll be able to see why. I've got an E here in the bass and an F there in the melody. So we've got this nasty little clash where these two notes are effectively right next to each other. If this was an octave higher, it would be there. So it's no great surprise that one isn't working. So I'm going to go back to what I had before and just keep that note playing the whole way through. Let's just glue those back together. And we'll just stick with this first bit of movement. I do quite like that one. I think that one works well. Now then, is there something we can do here? Well, we've got a note here which is G in the bass, and this is part of a G minor chord, and it's then going to a B flat. So again, thinking about the scale of G minor, we could try an A there so that we sort of fill in the gap between those notes. Let's see if that works. Okay, so we can hear that again, we've got the same issue here, that this isn't working quite as well as it might. Let's see why. We've got an A there, we've got an F there, G there. So it's going to be the A and the G probably this time that are clashing. It might work if we just make it the last beat. Well, that does work better, but I still don't like it as much as just keeping this static in the bass. And actually, as you're beginning to chop things up and move them around, it's going to be the case that you're going to make some mistakes, and you're also going to hit on some things that work really nicely. So whenever you're arranging like this and you're thinking about the parts within a block of chords like this, then obviously you've got a chance to use your ears, make some decisions, and think about what works and what doesn't. This sort of middle movement part that we've got here is working really nicely. So what else might we do? Well, to make this a bit more symphonic and a bit bolder, what we could do would be to take this whole part here, the top line, and I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to take it up the octave. Now, we probably won't need the velocities to be quite as loud because these are going to sort of shine out a little bit more loudly. So let's just pull these down a little bit. Might help if I actually took it up an octave rather than an octave and a semitone. That really did sound horrible. Let's try that again. Okay, that's working really nicely. Now, what else might we do to get this away from feeling like a sort of real pad sound? Well, with a lot of instruments, you'll find that they respond very well to layers of expression data. Now, expression allows you to effectively draw a sort of volume line, which isn't automation. It's going to feel more like a sort of natural phrase. And this particular set of sounds, I think, will respond really nicely to that. And I'll show you what I mean. Let's go and find expression. And what I'm going to do is to create a line so that we get some movement into this part so it feels a little bit less consistent. And let's think about how we want to shape this phrase. I'm going to create a first point here. And then what we'll do is sort of build towards the back end of each of these 2-bar phrases so that the phrase feels like it's coming and going a little bit. And here we'll create some variation by building to the middle of the bar, the middle of this chord. Let's see what that sounds like now. That's working well, but it's pretty subtle. Let's make these changes much more extreme so we can hear that sense of phrasing better than we are right now. Okay, so it's nice to have this movement, but that's clearly too extreme. And also we're sort of building to strange places in the phrase now. Let's think about something somewhere in between so that we get this kind of rising and falling, slightly more undulating character to the phrase. And let's keep this one louder so that it holds through to the end there. And that's working well. One thing I might try here might be to knock these 2 points out so that this second phrase really just does grow towards the end. But you can see that by using something like expression data, you have a chance to take what was a very basic sort of pad part, change it from a notes point of view by trying out different notes and different chords in different places, and then adding expression data to make it really come alive.